The 2026 World Cup will be the 60th anniversary of England's one and only World Cup win on home soil in 1966. Unless, of course, the Three Lions enjoy winter success in the still searing Qatar heat in December of 2022. In fact, you might quite reasonably be thinking, 2026, that's 5.5 years away. And given the postponement of Euro 2020, there are 3 major tournaments before England sets sail for Canada, Mexico, and the United States, assuming they qualify first. And you would, of course, be quite right. However, if I were to pick England's best team for the 2022 World Cup, it would be very similar to what I would consider to be England's best team right now. And that wouldn't be very interesting, would it? Besides, what has happened and continues to happen with regards to Qatar's hosting of the World Cup remains a dark stain on football's often all too murky past, so I'm very content to starve it of as much oxygen as possible. Of course, by picking an 11 and squad for a tournament 5.5 years away, it means that this video will be horribly inaccurate. A great deal can change in football in the space of a month, never mind half a decade, and there will be players who emerge in 2024 or 2025 and are only 13 or 14 years old right now who will likely be in contention to make that squad, but who obviously none of us have any way of knowing about at this moment in time. So I wish to stress that this is purely for a bit of fun, since we need that at the moment, and a lot of my videos can be quite serious, and to try and get some discussion going in the comments. Without further ado then, here is my best stab at naming England's starting 11 and 23-man squad for the 2026 World Cup, making the typically English and typically dangerous assumption that we will qualify for the tournament at all. Goalkeeper, Dean Henderson. In case the format isn't obvious, I'll start with my 11 and then list the other 12 players that I'm blindly speculating will make the squad. Between the sticks, you could pick any one of England's current 3 goalkeepers, since all 3 will still be in their prime years by 2026. Dean Henderson will be 29, Jordan Pickford will be 32, and Nick Pope, the oldest of the trio, will be 34, at which age many goalkeepers are actually hitting their best form. Pickford remains England's number 1 at this moment in time, although personally, I think Pope is the pick of the trio right now. I think Dean Henderson will eventually usurp David De Gea to become Manchester United's number 1 though, either by virtue of De Gea's departure or just Henderson's fine form, and once he does, it'll be hard to leave him out of the England team. Given his age advantage in comparison to his rivals, if Henderson can break through for the Three Lions, I suspect he'll be viewed as the best bet long term, and he'll become difficult to dislodge. It's worth pointing out, of course, that I also think he's an excellent goalkeeper, which is probably the biggest factor of all behind his inclusion. Right back, Trent Alexander-Arnold. Right back is likely to be one of the most contentious inclusions in this entire 11, given the plethora of talent, and particularly young talent, that England have in that position at this moment in time. There are 6 or 7 candidates who various sets of supporters will all feel are worthy of inclusion, but ultimately, if Trent Alexander-Arnold is the best bet now, aged 22, there's no real suggestion that he won't be in 5 years' time, aged 27. Of course, it is possible that others will eclipse him or that Alexander-Arnold will suffer a saddening fall from grace, but I think it far more likely that the Liverpudlian will simply become more formidable defensively in 5 years' time, whilst retaining his world-class creative output from the right flank. Centre-back, Ben White. The first current uncapped inclusion in our squad and 11, Ben White, is yet to even win a senior England call-up, aged 23. Predicting England's centre-backs for the 2022 World Cup is difficult enough, never mind 2026, but I do think that White is a real talent. So too is someone like Max Kilman or Ben Godfrey, of course, along with the more established names, but right now, if I had to hang my hat on one of them, it'd probably be White. Alert, athletic, and aggressive when it comes to winning the ball, White is also elegant on the ball and comfortable stepping out into midfield. Those are attributes that will only become more desirable as the sport continues to develop, and I think White has all the tools to become England's standout centre-back. He'll be 28 by the time the 2026 World Cup comes around, and should be at the peak of his powers around that time. Centre-back, John Stones. I'm taking something of a leap of faith again with this one, and it must be said that it is far more likely that neither Ben White or John Stones will even make the England squad for the 2026 World Cup than it is that they will both feature and both start as a duo. Such is the nature of these far-out predictions. Nonetheless, I've given myself that task, and I've decided to include John Stones thanks in no small part to his resurgence this season, and the belief, or hope at least, that this is a proper turnaround and not just a flash in the pan. Having spent years backing Stones to come good, it was at the very moment in which I was beginning to lose faith in the Yorkshireman that he seems to have reminded everyone of just how good he can be. Keeping Aymeric Laporte out of the Man City team is no small feat, but we ought not forget Stones' obvious talents. Another centre-back who combines the necessary physical attributes with genuine skill on the ball and accuracy in the pass, none of England's current centre-backs have a higher ceiling than Stones in terms of just how good he can become. He will be 32 by the time the 2026 World Cup comes around, and it would be excellent news for England if he had maximised his potential by that time. Left back. Bukayo Saka. Left back was a tough one really, because I actually rate Ben Chilwell a lot higher than some people, or at least some people on social media, which I'm acutely aware is very different to the real world. Whilst Chilwell is the obvious choice, I honestly believe that Bukayo Saka has what it takes to go right to the very top, as Harry Redknapp put it when he was called out about starting a young Frank Lampard at West Ham. Much like Lampard, Saka seems to have a fantastic attitude and a constant drive to improve, and that will serve him very well indeed. He may be a natural wide player, but we've seen him flourish as a wing-back already, and just look how well Alphonso Davies transitioned to full-back last season. Competition on the flanks for England is already extreme, and that will intensify by 2026. But there is an obvious trend in the fullback position which can accommodate players like Saka. So, whilst it may be a bold shout, I wouldn't be all that surprised if it turned out to be one of very few accurate predictions in this video. Holding midfield. Declan Rice. If I had to pick out maybe just 3 players who I think will start for England at the 2026 World Cup, barring any injuries of course, Declan Rice would be one of those 3. Capped 13 times already at the age of 21, the Englishman, turned Irishman, turned Englishman again, is the real deal. England have some enormously talented young flair players at this moment in time, but they will need a solid foundation, and Declan Rice is already among the most formidable defensive midfielders in the Premier League. Energetic, intelligent, and uncompromising in the tackle, there's no reason why Declan Rice can't win 100 caps for England. He'll be 27 once the 2026 World Cup comes around, and whilst West Ham fans won't thank me for saying it, I'd be incredibly surprised if he was still with the Hammers by then. Central midfield. Jude Bellingham. Declan Rice's partner in midfield was probably the toughest spot to fill in this entire 11. Not due to a lack of options, but just due to the lack of a really outstanding candidate. England have a wealth of long-term options in the number 10 position, but they are a little less blessed when it comes to 8s and 6s. Dean Henderson will be turning 36 when the 2026 World Cup comes around, so he'll have to have really impressive longevity to make the cut. Meanwhile, a handful of others, James Ward-Prowse chief among them, have the potential to kick on and become real contenders. Ultimately though, Jude Bellingham has already become England's 3rd youngest full international of all time, aged 17, and whilst he loves to pick up more advanced positions right now, it wouldn't surprise me if his long-term future was in a slightly deeper role, as a playmaker, a deep-lying playmaker I should say, picking passes, dictating play, and covering plenty of ground. Bellingham will still only be 22 when the 2026 World Cup comes around, which is quite incredible, and he's the youngest player in my 23-man squad. Since anyone any younger, we're unlikely to know a great deal about just yet. Right wing. Jadon Sancho. Staying in Dortmund, it seems hard to believe that Jadon Sancho won't be an England international for a very long time to come, but you can never be absolutely sure in football. The 20-year-old has won 18 caps to date, and even that seems like a limited tally given his performances in the Bundesliga. The young Chelsea fan who came through the youth ranks at Watford and Manchester City will be 26 at the time of the 2026 World Cup, and it's not unthinkable that he could be a Ballon d'Or candidate by that stage. The wide areas, along with the number 10 position and right back, are among the most competitive in this entire 11, but injuries aside, I'd be amazed if Sancho wasn't at the very least a squad member in 5.5 years' time. Attacking midfield. Phil Foden. Although the number 10 position for England is an extremely competitive one, with the likes of Mason Mount, James Maddison and Jack Grealish for competition, I'd still be personally amazed if Phil Foden didn't make the position his own over the next 5 years. Those of you who have been watching this channel since I started back in 2017 will know that I've long felt that Foden could be the solution to England's long-standing lack of front foot players who are technically gifted, willing to commit defenders and always looking to unlock a backline. It's a problem that was particularly apparent at the 2018 World Cup, but one which should be rectified at future tournaments given the players that Gareth Southgate now has at his disposal. I think Foden will become the pick of the bunch, and aged 26 at the time of the 2026 World Cup, it wouldn't surprise me if Foden wasn't just a starter for England, but possibly even the three line's most important player. Left wing, Raheem Sterling. I find it difficult to split Marcus Rashford and Raheem Sterling right now, so it's near impossible to try and split them in almost 6 years' time. I think Rashford possibly has the most room to improve and could become a really frightening prospect over the next few years. But then, I feel as though Sterling is less likely to drop off at all and has already exhibited superb consistency over a number of years. You rarely go into a tournament 100% sure of your starting 11 anyway, and Sterling and Rashford could become a closely fought battle for the best part of a decade. And there's obviously the possibility that both will start with Sancho missing out, as I suspect will be the case at the summer's Euros. When pushed, I tend to edge towards Sterling, and that's what's happened here. Centre forward, Harry Kane. Harry Kane has had his problems with injuries in recent years, and should they persist, it's possible that he could struggle to hold down the number 9 shirt for England in 2026, by which stage he'll be just about to turn 33. With that being said, if he can maintain his fitness, I think he'll most likely still be among the first names on the team sheet well into his 30s. Kane has never relied on blistering pace, and he's shown this season that he is more than capable of adapting his game and not just maintaining his level of performance, but actually improving it. Right now, he is England's best player, and I think that's likely to remain the case for some time to come. If he can avoid any serious injuries between now and 2026, Kane will be in a phenomenal position to become England's all-time record goalscorer. And if I had to bet on who would be England's captain in 2026, my money would be on it sticking with the Tottenham man. So that is my extremely speculative 2026 England starting 11, of which I suspect only half will stand the test of time, and possibly as few as 3 or 4 of them. But that's the nature of the sport. Going through the rest of the squad, positionally, the 2 goalkeepers are Nick Pope and Jordan Pickford, both of whom, as I explained earlier, should still be in their pomp. And there isn't a plethora of outstanding young English goalkeepers at this moment in time, although Aaron Ramsdale and Sam Johnston, who isn't actually all that young, deserve to be mentioned. As backup in defence, I have perhaps somewhat controversially opted for Tariq Lamptey as backup at right back, ahead of the likes of Reece James and Aaron Wan-Bissaka. I've gone for Joe Gomez and Eric Dyer covering at centre back, and Ben Chilwell as a more orthodox left back, serving as Bukayo Saka's extremely capable deputy and possible replacement against stronger opposition. I think Lamptey has the potential to be quite special, hence his inclusion. Gomez and Dyer can both cover in other positions, which is always handy in a tournament squad, and for the same reason, I almost picked Ainsley Maitland-Niles rather than Chilwell as the other backup at fullback, but ultimately, I think that would be extremely harsh on the Chelsea man. As depth in midfield, we have Jack Grealish, Mason Mount, and James Ward-Prowse. My suspicion is that Jack Grealish's fine form this season isn't so much a purple patch, but rather evidence of his enormous talent, and I think he'll continue to give Gareth Southgate and any future England managers a real selection headache. Mount features because he's young, he's extremely talented, and he's the one who you feel as though he could offer cover to both Foden in an attacking midfield role and Bellingham in a slightly deeper role. And lastly, James Ward-Prowse, who I mentioned earlier as having come close to starting, much like Grealish. I feel as though his form this season isn't a flash in the pan, but simply a symptom of him growing as a player and the many tools in his arsenal, so he had to make the squad. And finally, in the forward areas, although you could argue Jack Grealish is also a forward, were he still playing predominantly on the left flank by 2026, but the 3 official forwards are Marcus Rashford, Mason Greenwood, and Dominic Calvert-Lewin. Rashford was obviously neck and neck with Sterling for a starting berth. Greenwood has so much potential, he could push Kane or either of the wingers in no time if he really kicks on, and I think Dominic Calvert-Lewin will continue to be among the Premier League's most accomplished goalscorers for some time to come, and will establish himself as a regular squad member, if not all that often a starter, for much of the next decade for England. Some of the most honourable mentions who just missed out include the likes of Reece James, Aaron Wan-Bissaka, Harry Maguire, Tammy Abraham, Ruben Loftus-Cheek, James Maddison, Callum Hudson-Odoi, Ainsley Maitland-Niles, and Jarrod Bowen, among many others. A couple of perhaps more outside or obscure shouts who I almost included, but just decided against in a pure percentages game in my final draft, are Angel Gomez and Eberechi Eze. Both are extraordinary footballers who obviously have a long way to go before they made the England squad, but are talented enough to dislodge a number of current squad members, and either player being in contention come 2026 wouldn't come as a great shock to me. In terms of the manager, I suspect Gareth Southgate will still be in charge off the back of winning Euro 2021, the 2022 World Cup, and Euro 2024. Sacking him after that trio of successes would seem harsh, but the waistcoat-donning former Villa captain might quit after England become the first national team to record a consecutive quadruple of major trophies in 2026, resigning to replace the Queen as the UK's head of state, by which stage Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland will have left the Union, and Southgate will have to guide England out of a depression and into the brave new world, pioneering a green revolution, a programme of investment in schools and hospitals, and managing to execute not just a withdrawal of troops from the Middle East, but everlasting peace and political stability across the world. Hey, we're allowed to dream. In truth, I've no idea who'll be the England manager in 5 or 6 years' time. I guess Dean Smith, Chris Wilder, and Eddie Howe will be among the bookies' favourites, but another outside bet might be Graham Potter, who'd be good fun and would actually be quite a good England boss, I think, given his man management skills and ability to harmonise a squad in a short amount of time, which is so crucial in the international game. So that is it for today's video, but thank you all as ever for watching. Give us a like if you enjoyed the video, let me know your thoughts down below in the comments section, and make sure, just double check that you are subscribed and have notifications turned on for HITC Sevens. You can also find me on Twitter or Instagram via the username @HITC Sevens on either platform should you wish to do so.